be a light for you in dark places when all other lights go out.
Hello everyone, this is DCHL Devin here, and welcome to another How to Play, How to Buy video. And today we're going to go ahead and talk about our first Legendary Legion on this channel, and that is the Return of the King Legion. I went ahead and played this at the Shadow in the East tournament up in the Rhode Island area earlier this year, and I had a lot of fun with it. This army is extremely well designed. It is very powerful and actually quite competitive, and I would absolutely recommend it if you want to play a Men of the Dead force. Now keep in mind, I am only talking about the Return of the King Legion itself, which means no allies, so I'm not going to go into any alliances whatsoever in the alliance matrix, but also this is not a how to play on Dunharrow or any other variation of that list. It is strictly the Legion itself. So just bear that in mind. I'm not going to talk about how to overwhelm without numbering Men of the Dead and just playing nothing but that and stuff like that. So let's go ahead into it about the pros and cons of this Legion. I'm going to treat it just like as if it's a normal faction in the game. So the first thing we got to mention as a pro to this list is excellent hero options. You have the best heroes in the game at your disposal. I mean, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and the King of the Dead really would be all you need, but you do have Herald options, and this has everything you need as far as the heroes you want. Most specifically with Aragorn, he has access to all the heroic actions. He has Anduril for free, so that means he can cut up almost anything he needs to go against. He has free might a turn, which allows you to keep calling heroic moves, which with this army can be crucial with the low might count that you often have. Assassinations are super easy with Legolas. Gimli is a tank. Your King of the Dead buffs all of your warriors indirectly, and so does Aragorn. King of the Dead, of course, lowering courage profiles, making it harder for your opponent to charge you. And Aragorn giving you access to a banner bonus, which is actually a bonus given to him as part of this Legion. Absolutely essential in that case. So you also have, I mean, honestly, we could go on and on about these heroes. They are fantastic options. You're absolutely going to want to bring, well, first off, you have to bring the King of the Dead and Aragorn, whom are expensive options. They will cut down your numbers, which we will discuss in a bit. But if you were to get into more of the heroes, you absolutely have powerhouse options. The next thing we have to talk about is durable troops. You are defense 7 base, and more often than not, defense 8. I would highly recommend giving a shield to all of your Men of the Dead. This not only gives you access to the shielding option in case you need to prolong the game out or just simply defend your Men of the Dead, but also is a defense 8 unit. Anything with strength 3 will need 6s followed by 4s, and with the low numbers that you're going to have, you're really going to want every single thing in your favor to make sure that your opponent does not wound you. The next thing we got to go into is you are terrifying across your entire army. With the exception of the 3 hunters themselves, your entire army causes terror, and your King of the Dead has Harbinger of Evil. This means that you do not mind going second at all, and your opponent will have a lot of difficulty if they're a low courage army charging into your ranks. If you're in a good versus evil tournament, this is ideal. Good armies tend to have a lot of courage buffs and abilities to get your courage to be higher, but evil armies have less so of that. Not only are they often less courage, but their only way to buff courage, usually a shaman, is something Legolas can easily take out. So this is definitely an advantage your army has. Your low numbers get mitigated by these two factors. You are also extremely hard hitting. Keep in mind that you're going against the courage value of everything you're striking. And with your Men of Dead, the Aragorn has Anduril, so he kills on 4s regardless of what the target is, unless he needs less. But the Men of the Dead, if you imagine most things in the game have a courage 4 or less, or actually a courage 3 generally. That's about the average you're going to see. A courage of 3 is going to be wounded by a 4, with your Men of the Dead having a strength of 3. This effectively gives you a strength of 6. So you should think of your Man of the Dead profile as fight 3, strength 6, defense 8, 1 attack, 1 wound, and 6 courage. So that is an insane stat line for their point cost. Not to mention, if they do have courage 4, the King of the Dead brings them back down to courage 3, in which case you are still wounding like this. And orcs, you wound on 3, so you are an effective strength 7 against orc models. If that doesn't make sense, normally you're wounding orcs on a 5, let's say they have defense 5, well now you're wounding them on 3s, so it's like you have strength 7 on your side. It's brutal. So your guys will tear through things effectively quick. Now there are some things that counter you a little bit. Elves, you're going to need 5s because their natural courage of 5 even dropped, goes to 4. And things like berserkers will drive you nuts because you actually improve their stat line. But barring these little outliers, you are extremely hard hitting in this game. The next thing we got to go into is a high courage value. So you have a courage of 6 almost across the board. Your heroes, of course, don't care about anything, which means you just don't care about terror. So you cause terror and don't care about terror. It is a fantastic bonus to have. That means you're also quite immune to being broken. So that is definitely something to take into account. The next thing is, and this is a small bonus, but water. Water is pretty rare in tournaments. You don't usually have to worry about it, but if it is there, your guys actually just walk over it. Pretty much your entire army does. It has a spectral walk ability, allows them to treat it as clear terrain. Now just keep in mind, Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli will not have such a bonus. If you happen to be just playing those guys, you might be able to keep them in situations where they're not having to deal with it. But your troops themselves, though, can flank and maneuver in water, which is something your opponents will not be prepared for, as their units are generally moving half speed in shallow water, and deep water, well, that's a whole different problem. So with all those fantastic bonuses they have, let's talk about the cons of this army. So first off, you have no range, well, except for Legolas. So if you happen to be playing in a smaller point game, Aragorn and the King of the Dead and the Dead themselves are going to cost you so much, you're probably not going to have the points to afford Legolas at lower points, maybe lower than 700 points. But so in that case, you would have 0 range at all. Legolas, of course, being the exception. If you have him, you have a little range, but effectively you're going to move toward your opponent. So this is helpful in the fact that Aragorn has those heroic marches available. It allows you to weather some firepower. If your opponent gets too many rounds of shooting against you and has things like, let's say, a Harad gun line or something like that, where they're like 50% bows, or Rangers, or Mirkwood Rangers where they're 100% bows, they're actually going to shoot some dead off the field. Yes, they generally need 6s followed by 5s, but you'd often be surprised how many dead they can kill if you're not heroic marching. So the next thing is limited targets for enemy magic. You have very powerful heroes, but you also have a limited selection. Generally, you're only going to have 2 or 3 at most, which means if your opponent is playing like Angmar, let's say, that is going to be a nightmare because they're going to transfix obvious targets. Your army is going to want to stay around Aragorn, and so they're going to transfix, paralyze him. If you're fighting against Be'ador, you're going to have Deal Sauron doing the same thing. Like enemy magic users, Gondor using Gandalf, they're all going to target the most obvious choices, and those obvious choices have heavy impacts on your army. The King of the Dead has 6 will, so he's highly resistant to magic, so he's a less of an effective option, but Aragorn is going to feel some pain on this one. So just keep that in mind, that your hero and force general that your whole army has to stay around is something they can kind of dictate your movement with transfixes and such. So the next thing we have to get into is limited troop options. You only have Warriors of the Dead and Riders of the Dead. You can almost think of the Heralds of the Dead as another troop choice, just kind of given a hero stat line, just based on the way they function. But overall, you have 2 guys. So, it makes constructing your list super easy, but overall, you're not going to have a lot to play with there. The next thing is expensive heroes cut the numbers down on this army. I have mentioned that a couple times, but you are going to have lower numbers. Generally, if you just take Aragorn, King of the Dead, a 700-point-ish game, you can have like 30 troops. If you put Legolas in there for a little bit more competitive viability, you're going to have even less than that. Also note that these heroes don't deploy together. So unlike the, say, Great Company faction where they all deploy as a single unit, this army deploys as separate individuals all over the place. And so in Maelstrom of Battle, that can cause a little bit of issues. Luckily, Aragorn and Legolas have enough might to kind of deal with this problem, but that is something you have to take into account. Your heroes are not the only expensive ones, though. You also have expensive troop options. So your expensive troops are 14 points base, and they only get more expensive as you keep giving them stuff. So that means your army is going to be low. And luckily, you have Defense 8 and Terrifying, so it should help that problem, but it is something we should mention. Any Riders of the Dead complicate that even more. Don't bring banners. Aragorn is already a banner for the entire army, so you don't need to worry about that problem. The next thing is you have concentrated might sources. So the King of the Dead has 1 point of might, and he can only call heroic moves with the heralds, but that means your heralds aren't dividing the might options anywhere else. So If you don't have Legolas or Heralds, and you only have the King of the Dead and Aragorn, which is going to be many of your games, then you're going to have to worry about the fact that Aragorn is really your only source of might. So if you want to call heroic moves, heroic actions of any sort, you're going to need Aragorn in the right places. If the right places happens to be multiple places, then you're going to have to take your time getting to one and the other. This can be a problem in domination matches and such like that, where you have to kind of keep your army together and kind of destroy your enemy opponent in pockets until you have the time to kind of maneuver the way you need to. This can also be a problem in Fog of War or any other mission that needs you to split up. That is another problem with this army, is a bubble army. So Aragorn has a 6-inch banner. He is your only source of heroic actions unless you take Legolas, and your King of the Dead has Harbinger, which you're definitely going to want your Men of the Dead around. So because of the bubble nature of it, you're going to have to worry about, one, enemy siege weapons. So siege weapons are becoming popular in the current meta today, so they will break your army apart a little bit, and that can create a little bit of a shift in dynamics. But also any missions that require you to split up, you're going to have to get really, really creative on how you do that. Because if you send a single individual Man of the Dead here and there, they can die, and anyone that dies in this army is brutal because of your low model count. So just note that you are concentrating everything around you. Even your heralds don't help because they only allow your king to call the heroic actions, not your heralds themselves. So next, we're just going to go into the how to play part of this video. That pretty much covers the pros and cons. One thing we have to mention, the fact that you are concentrating your army around Aragorn. You're going to want to be able to move quickly. Aragorn mitigates this with heroic marches, heroic moves. So you're definitely going to want Aragorn in the heat of the action. A lot of times if you don't do that, what you can do is you can kind of blockade sections. Like, so sometimes, let's say Aragorn is kind of shifted. Your whole army's like kind of around there, and he's kind of shifted off to one side. You can use your Men of the Dead on the other side to shield. Use shielding actions. You can take a majority of your spear supports over the side where Aragorn is and destroy that section really fast, while this section shields and uses terror in order to hold back lines. This is actually a pretty effective option, I have found, depending on how your terrain is fitted. So it allows you to utilize most of your numbers in a concentrated area, but still occupying a large space. This is great for, let's say, hold ground. In hold ground, you're going to have to occupy this 6-inch bubble area around an objective. Well, you can afford to do that because your opponent's going to have such a hard time kind of even charging you or dealing with you. Also, use heroic combats as often as possible. If Aragorn did not call a heroic move, use heroic combats to try to thin out the enemy ranks. This is really crucial if your opponent has like 60 plus models on you when you have 30, but you definitely want to go ahead and cut through them as much as possible. See if you can fit the King of the Dead into those combats, get the King of the Dead's fight 5 into more targets. And that will allow you to kill the opponent a lot faster. So I'd actually recommend keeping them kind of together. Also, Aragorn can use her combats to save the king from bad situations, and that can be a helpful thing as well. You're also going to want to get comfortable with going second. Going second is actually beneficial for your army, even against cav charging type of armies, because your opponent now will show you what is charging and what is not. And that is huge. You can actually start multi-charging. Like, say they fail a charge, and then get a charge. Well, now you can just completely surround and kill that one unit that actually got into the combats. And you can wait for the other ones when it's their turn. This allows you to effectively fight a massive portion of your, with your army. You have a big part of your army fighting a smaller portion of your opponent's army. And this is piecemealing, but done in a very creative way. You don't have to, maneuver or anything like that. You just wait for your opponent to charge. Now, let's say you get priority. Well, this is where you're going to want to kind of do the same thing in reverse. See if you can multi-charge particular units while blocking off paths, so that way your opponent has to pull off those fights. Sometimes they'll fail to do that, and that allows you to have multiple units in a single fight where you have the edge. And that hurts against, once again, you basically have a strength of 6 or 7, depending on the unit. If you win combats, you will kill almost everything you touch. So this is something definitely important to keep in mind. Be comfortable losing priority. This allows you also to save the free might for the heroic combats that I mentioned with Aragorn. And he's almost always successful since he has Andorra. So the next thing is to hero hunt when available. The one thing that your opponent will have to deal with you is enemy heroes. If he has anything that is strength 5, then they will actually be able to kill your Men of the Dead. Unless you took my advice and brought shields with you, then they're still going to need 6s. But heroes sometimes with the Burly option or anything else like that, they're going to tear through you. Azog, Dane, any of them, they're going to just absolutely wreck through this army with zero problems. Burly means that your defensive 8 means nothing. They never need higher than a 5 to wound you. You're gonna want to make sure Aragorn is dealing with those heroes as much as possible, even if he's got to call a heroic defense, because he'll get slaughtered by that hero normally. Let's say it's a Balrog or something. You're gonna want to doorstop that thing. Otherwise, it will tear through your army. Or any other heroes who are capable of doing such an action. Even smaller heroes you might be surprised about, like actually played a match with Guritz, I believe. He's strength 5 and he has a pick, so they can piercing strike to a defense of 6, strength of 6, and that means he kills you on 5s naturally. If he has Burly, it's now 4s. So these are things you really, really want to watch out for. Another thing you want to watch out for is piercing strikers. Piercing strikers are guys who take no penalty at all for improving their strength. In fact, try not to remind your opponent at all that they even have axes and picks, because they will piercing strike across the board. They'll just say, I'm always piercing striking. There's no point in not doing that. So just watch that. You'll find most opponents tend to forget about it. Piercing strike isn't as common an ability used as it was in days past, so they're often going to forget. Let them do that, because even bringing a guy who is once strength 3 to strength 4 means they need 6s instead of 6s by 4s to wound you. And because you're attacking courage, it means nothing. Only Legolas would really benefit, or Gimli if you have them in your list. And so you're going to want, at higher points, you're going to get a few options, maybe 700 points above, and a few more options of heroes. So what should you bring? My recommendation is Legolas. I've been saying his name a lot in the video for good reason. His auto hit allows you to dictate the fights a little bit better. He can assassinate targets like shamans, which allow them to charge your units, or Círdan, which he can cast Hour of Command, and damn, he's popular nowadays. So you absolutely want Legolas, who can kind of start to dictate that. They can take out key units that are making the enemy charge you, or start to dictate the battlefield, maybe get a hero off his horse so his lance bonuses don't help him wound the men of the dead so easily. This also goes into the piecemealing. You're going to want to make sure that you do that. Now, I mentioned you have a creative way to piecemeal, but actually try to do that when you can. Oftentimes, because your army is so concentrated, you have a large number of points and a fewer number of models. So if you can take that fewer number of models and only attack a section of your opponent's army, you are guaranteed to pretty much just walk right over it, because they need their entire army to contend with you. So this is an advantage you have with Heroic March. You can kind of Heroic March off to one side or another, especially if your opponent makes battle lines. So this is something you definitely want to take advantage of. Now that we've gone into all the how to play, pros and cons, let's go into how to buy this army, and I will let you know Games Workshop made this easy for you. So this will be super quick. The 3 hunters are $40, and you get the 3 hunters, so of course you're going to want them. The Men of the Dead are $40 for a pack of 24. Believe me, this is all you're going to really want for a long time anyway. And then the King of the Dead is $12.25. So this army, for even under $100, pretty much buys itself. I mean, you really don't need any more than that. At that point, you can start getting Riders of the Dead and maybe Heralds when they come out, and start fitting it out. But you haven't even gotten technically to the 100 mark, and you're already done. So this is something, an easy army for beginners. It's easy to play. It's a great way to experience the game. So actually, I would highly recommend this army to beginners. And if you are a competitive player, I would still highly recommend this army, because it is a competitive legion. So absolutely love it. You're going to see a lot more of these guys with this legion. So let me know, guys, if you have any more questions. I am going to go into the Dunharrow army list just as Dunharrow itself. Just going to make that a separate video, because they have alliance options that I should go into. But let me know if you have any thoughts, any other things maybe I missed about this, and I will hope to talk to you all very soon.